Hi, I'm Amanda,
And I'm Cara.
and welcome to the Historical Society podcast. Thank you for joining us today. So
You're going to
today,
say your usual, I can't believe we're on episode 11.
I thought about doing that, and then I was like, I'm not going to do it.
I think that's wise.
Okay, but we did it anyway. Still got it
Yeah,
in there.
it was fun. I
Yeah, it
enjoyed
was
it.
fun. Yeah, good job.
So, today is another classical music and sexual violence episode, part 2. The first episode was episode 2, that we did detailed sexual violence within our field. Today we'll be talking about the University of Texas Butler School of Music and allegations against Dan Welcher, a composition professor, former composition professor. But before we get into that, Amanda wanted to detail patterns of abuse to look for as we get into this again. So you
Right.
want to take that
Yeah.
for a moment?
So in episode 2, we talked about this, but I thought I would just kind of do a review in case you forgot, or maybe you didn't listen to episode 2. Okay, so we were thinking of these as patterns to look for. So number 1, abuse of power. So you'll see people in a lot of these stories who are in positions of authority, like teachers or professional musicians, who are going to abuse their power. Then number 2, you're going to see a lack of accountability because of their elevated positions. There are not many people who are willing or able to hold them accountable. I think more willing. I think that's usually unwilling. Number 3, easy access to vulnerable people. And number 4, a desire to cover up, silence, or keep the behavior from being revealed. So those are specific patterns we talked about in episode 2. And then also in episode 2, we talked about these other elements that you will see through a lot of these types of allegations. One is hero worship, the halo effect, fear of retaliation, moral failures of desires for success at any cost, victim blaming, systemic racism and sexism. I also wrote the patriarchy and rape culture. Those are sort of related to victim blaming. All that's kind of bound up together. And then the myth of a high prevalence of false allegations. And I always want to talk about that because the statistics that we use on this podcast, we have gotten from the RAINN organization, the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. And their website is rainn.org. And they update their statistics periodically, and they also base them on a research from the CDC and statistics from the Bureau. Is it the Justice Department? The Bureau of Statistics, part of the Justice Department? I can't remember what the title of that is, but yeah. Anyway, and so the statistic is for false allegations, it's the same for other crimes. It sits somewhere between 2 to 8%. So that means when women come forward with allegations, there's a 2 to 8% chance that they are lying. So it's very low.
And I also want to add to that, which I always like to. Oftentimes, when police investigate these types of crimes, they will lump cases which they did not prosecute for any number of reasons. They'll lump them into false allegation piles, which is not accurate.
Right.
Not having enough evidence to prosecute does not equal a false allegation.
Right.
It's just one that has not been investigated and or prosecuted.
Right.
So I think that number is actually lower, but
yeah,
those are the numbers.
right.
Anyway, the stuff that goes on behind the scenes with that is just deplorable.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we always put a plug in for this book, but Credible by Deborah Turkheimer is infuriating, but really important because it's very eye-opening to the legal system and law enforcement and their handling of sexual assault allegations.
It's a great book. She said she knew she needed to write it because there was not one of its kind out there.
Yeah.
And she was correct.
Right.
It's a really, really good book.
Definitely.
Okay, shall we get into it?
Yes. So we're going to start our tale with an article.
Our tale.
No. Start this discussion with an article from the Chronicle of Higher Education. And the article's title is Music's Open Secret, written by Robin Wilson, published on June 6th, 2002. So a long time ago.
Yep.
And in this article, two allegations came out about Dan Welcher. And we've already said he was, at this point, he was a professor of composition at UT Butler School of Music, University of Texas. And the first person who is in this article goes on the record with her name, files a complaint with her name. Her name is Monica Lynn. And I'm just going to read this short little blurb about her from this article. It says, Monica Lynn moved to Austin to earn an undergraduate degree in music composition in the early 1990s. She was divorced and had earned a bachelor's degree in nursing. She attended music courses part-time while working at local hospitals. Ms. Lynn says she knew from the beginning that the way male professors at UT treated female students wasn't right. Monica says, this is a quote of hers, "I'm a really strong person," she says. "I'm older and I have a grasp of what's acceptable and what's legal." And later in Robin Wilson's article, there's another quote by Monica, and she says, quote, "I never had a chance to find out if I was a composer because I had to deal with so much abusive behavior. I couldn't stand the thought of leaving this school and knowing that every young woman who comes here and wants to study composition is going to be destroyed." And so that, I wanted to highlight that because that explains, it's a really concise way for her of explaining why she came forward with her allegations as well.
Okay, so let's get into the allegations now.
Yeah.
So as we said, Monica is or was a nurse. I'm actually not sure what she's doing now, but she alleged that during her composition jury, that Dan Welcher didn't talk about music. He questioned her about a milk bank, which was a place where women could come and donate breast milk for premature babies. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And I guess because she was a nurse, he thought that was relevant to bring up in her jury.
Right.
Then he also said he imagined all these women coming in and breastfeeding in public and then chuckled about it, like exposing themselves and breastfeeding in public. There was another allegation of hers where she was at a dinner party. Was it at a dinner party?
It was at a party. Yeah.
Party of some sort. Okay. And he invited her to a strip club, which she turned down the offer. But then he loudly proclaimed to a room of people that she would be dancing in her dog collar and chains. So those were Monica's two main allegations against him. And one, I think the reason why she went and reported to the university. Do you want to do the other?
Sure. And the other one, well, the other thing that she talked about, and so we'll get to other articles that are eventually written about this as well. But this story from another article, she talks about how she was denied entry into the music composition program. And that was after she clearly made it clear to Dan Welcher that she was not a fan of these types of sexual jokes. And so she viewed it as being barred from, so there was a type of retaliation. And I think that was also part of her complaint as well.
Well, but that wasn't the reason she went. Was that the reason she reported in the first place, though? That was just retaliatory.
I think it was just retaliatory, but I think it was, that's rolled up into it, I'm sure, because she's not being treated fairly. Like
no, of course not. She's not being treated fairly. I just wondered when she made the allegations. Had that happened yet?
Yeah, that had already happened, I believe.
Okay.
So, I guess that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know for sure, but the way I read the article, it was part of that.
Okay.
Yeah, this article doesn't talk about that at all. It's in another article. Yeah. Anyway,
so there's an anonymous source that also reported in that article. That was also highlighted in the 2002 article.
Right.
This person was enrolled in the doctoral program in 2002 as a music composition major. And she also went to a dinner party of some sort. And while she and other students were there, Dan Welcher sang a song called "Isn't It Nice to Have a Penis?" And then, along with multiple sexually explicit comments that were made at the dinner, then he showed the students at the party naked picture of himself on vacation, and then a picture of a female cat that he said had just been gangbanged, quote unquote, by a group of male cats.
Right.
So these comments were made, I guess, at a private dinner party, but with in public in a group of students.
With students.
With students, yes.
Right.
So those were the two allegations that were detailed in this article way back in 2002.
Right.
So now we'll get into what did the university do about it. Do you want to take over?
Yeah. So I'm taking this. I'm going to read a paragraph again from this article by Robin Wilson, and it begins: the university's investigation this spring into Ms. Lynn's charges was conducted by Lee S. Smith, Associate Vice President for Legal Affairs. According to documents obtained under the state's open records law, Mr. Smith asked Mr. Welcher and his colleagues whether he had said the things Ms. Lynn alleged. All of the professors said no. Mr. Smith won't discuss the investigation. The university asserts that it asked several students whether they had heard a professor make off-color comments at a party, and that all of them said no. I just find this investigation like, really? Sorry, I just...
Well, there's so much that plays into that. People are scared. Their careers are obviously harmed when you say anything about anyone in power.
Of course. Yeah.
Plus, they don't even, I mean, what do they say? We asked his friends.
Yeah, we asked his friends and they said no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that before.
Yeah.
He said he didn't do it.
Exactly. Okay. So the next paragraph I was going to read about this is from an article we haven't gotten to yet, but this article was published much later. We'll get to that. But I'm going to read a paragraph from that article, and I'll tell you which one this was when we get to it. So this says, so what happened? There was an investigation at the school, but Monica Lynn also filed a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, which is part of the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education. And so this paragraph. When the Federal Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights investigation into alleged sexual harassment at the Butler School of Music concluded, Lynn was dismayed with the results. Despite the office finding that 3 of the 7 incidents alleged by Lynn were corroborated by investigators, and 2 more were found to have conflicting evidence, interviews with randomly selected students and faculty members led the investigators to conclude that they had been provided no information that indicated the existence of sexual harassment or a sexually hostile environment at the University of Texas at Austin's Butler School of Music. Interviews with randomly selected students and faculty were standard when investigating Title IX claims at the time, as the Department of Education sought evidence that an academic environment was broadly hostile on the basis of sex. End quote. And so, Cara and I, we were curious about this because it makes it sound like the Department of Education was looking if the entire School of Music was an environment of sexual harassment. It almost seems that way.
Or more broad. It was a more broad assessment. It's like, well, okay, 3 of these allegations were corroborated, and 2 were what? I guess you could say partially corroborated, or it was confusing.
Yeah.
Yet there's no evidence of anything.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
Can you turn your mic up a little bit? I want to see if your mic can come up just a little bit.
Yeah. Let me see.
It's a little quiet on my end.
Is it better now?
Maybe a little more?
A little more? I'm going to be really loud. How about now?
Better.
Better? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
No, not at all.
I don't understand that.
I don't either.
Well, I think the bigger part to me that makes no sense is that 3 of the incidents were corroborated.
Right.
So they're right there. There's evidence.
Right.
So
and the school didn't do anything with that. The school wasn't like, oh, the 3 of these are corroborated? Oh, maybe we should do something about this. But literally nothing was done at all. It's
okay.
So weird.
Well,
yeah.
So that was sort of the university's response, right? So let's go on to what Dan Welcher said for himself.
Oh boy, this is good.
So Mr. Welcher refused to speak to the Chronicle, but sent several statements by email. He vigorously denies making the comments that Miss Lynn had attributed to him, and contends that she had concocted a story of sexual harassment out of bitterness over her academic failure. The only reputation I have, this is a quote from him, is that of a very demanding teacher. I do sometimes intimidate certain kinds of students with my directness and my candor about their music, but none of this has anything to do with sexual harassment. Wow.
Yeah.
In a letter to the university, Mr. Welcher made it clear that he believes Miss Lynn lacks talent. A would-be composer who lacks sufficient musical skills, a good ear, or the ability to produce competent music after 3 years of study must face the unpleasant fact that she is not suited to this career, he wrote. If the student cannot accept this, it is her right to go elsewhere and try again, but not to malign the faculty with libelous statements. Wow.
Right. Yeah. And in another article, she says that the classes she took prior to trying to become a composition major, that she was getting A's in her composition classes.
Of course.
Yeah.
I don't understand why this is such the quick thing to do, like the tactic of like, well, they suck at what they do.
Yeah.
They said the truth about me, so now they suck at what they do.
Right.
It's like a double whammy, like insult to injury.
Right. Yeah.
That's disgusting.
It is.
If you want my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. Reaction at the university.
And
So now we're going to talk a little bit about sort of what the music community at large thought about these allegations coming out.
Right. And so the first one is from that same article by Robin Wilson from the Chronicle of Higher Education.
So we're still back in 2002.
Right.
Right now.
Yes. And this is I'm just going to read from her article. Russell Elf Pinkston, an associate professor of music composition at Austin, says Ms. Lynn's charges amount to a smear campaign against the faculty here. Quote, the irony is we are bending over backwards to support and encourage female composers. If you have anything going for you as a woman composer, you can write your own ticket here.
Wow.
Oh. Sure. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Okay.
He said it, ladies.
There you go. Write your ticket.
You got a free ticket to success.
Yeah.
Everything that comes with it.
Yeah. Woo. And Sammy.
I was worried. I hadn't heard that so plainly put, but now I feel better.
I do. I can write my own ticket.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkston.
Yes. Oh, man. He's still, I think, a professor emeritus there.
Oh.
Yeah.
Emeritus.
I always wonder, after we get to the end of this, do people ever recant these things? Okay.
They probably just sit quiet.
Yeah, they're like, just sit really still and no one will know you're here.
Do you see me? Do you see me?
Oh, man.
Okay, there's more. There's
All
more.
right, so
Gets worse.
It does. So after this article comes out, people write letters to the editor, to the Chronicle, in response to this article.
Okay.
And so this collection of letters to the editor, if you want to find that, Google this, weighing the evidence and allegations of sexual misconduct at music schools. And it was published July 12th of 2002. And there were 5 people who wrote letters. And I'm going to start with the first 2. Both of these people are in the music industry. The first is Daniel S. Godfrey, who at the time was professor of music at Syracuse University in New York. And I just quickly summarized it as the argument he made was, I know him and I don't think he would do it. And the second argument he made was, his girlfriend told me he didn't do it. There you have it. Okay.
And then he called Robin Wilson a highly irresponsible journalist.
Right.
Based on those two.
Yes. His assessment.
Those two deeply thoughtful.
Yes.
Critical thinking.
Yeah.
Statements.
And then the second one comes from someone named Christy McGarity, and she was a PhD candidate in the music composition department. And unfortunately, so her argument is, I didn't see it, so it's not real. And it didn't happen to me, so it's not real. That tends to be a lot of women respond that way, unfortunately.
I mean, I know that's a knee-jerk reaction for people when they know a person and they think they can't be capable of these things. It makes sense in that respect, but that's not evidence that it didn't happen.
Right.
that's just like a hope, a belief in someone
Right.
that's not really critically thinking about anything or looking into it with any sort of investigative technique.
Right. You know, it's interesting. I like to think of, I mean, I don't like learning about serial killers. Like, that is not my thing. Like, Cara, you
I
like
do.
true crime. You've got some podcasts you listen to,
I do.
but
All of them.
some, all of them. Yeah. So, me, no, I'm watching a cartoon or something. I don't know. I'm escaping from reality.
Yeah.
You're prepping for reality, and I'm like, I don't want to think about it.
Trying to learn about what's around me.
Yeah. And so, but related to this, so if you look at someone like Ted Bundy, right? He was viewed by so many people as this
Oh my
amazing
God.
guy, right?
Charming,
Yeah.
smart,
He was given
promising,
he worked
handsome.
for a rape crisis center, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's terrifying, right?
He worked for that, and then he was given the keys to San Francisco by the mayor, right?
Like I think he
Or
saved
something.
a young boy or something. He saved a child. And
Yeah.
yeah, he was awarded by the mayor or something like that.
So like all these people thought, what a
And then
great guy
well,
Ted
everybody that
Bundy
knew him
is.
also thought he was very charming and nice.
Yeah.
And he was doing these horrific things behind the scenes under the cover of like, you know, seeming injured. You know, he would put his leg or his arm in a cast and walk on crutches and ask for help and then brutally attack people. I mean,
Terrible.
even we've seen all these documentaries out on him now, and even the people that were closest to him, his girlfriend, daughter, they all thought he was a different person. There were glimpses, I guess, eventually, but you know,
Yeah.
I just nobody wants these horrible things to happen, but it's kind of like they do. It's the reality of the world we live in, and unfortunately, they're the people that are around us.
Right.
It's kind of an unsettling thought, but it's the reality.
Right. It's depressing. It's a depressing thought.
It is, and
really is.
I try hard to have empathy for people who are friends with people like this, or wives of people like this, or girlfriends, or mothers, or fathers, or brothers, or sisters, because it's got to be hard to wrestle with that. This person that you thought you knew,
Right.
suddenly there's all these allegations coming out about them.
Right.
It's got to be deeply unsettling, and the desire to deny it is probably so super strong.
Right.
Anyway,
Okay, so along with those two letters to the editor, there are people though who do write letters to support. The first one is written by Pat Ames from California, where she talks about her own experience with unwanted touching and sexual comments by a college teacher, and how she was retaliated against by lowering her grades, and how this article reminded her of this, and how it was meaningful for her. And the
you
other,
know,
go ahead.
just while we're on that topic, I'm glad that people are willing to write about their own experience. I mean, I know I know wanting to talk about it because it's healing,
Yeah.
but it's like, why do people go after someone's ability, you know, their talents, their in this instance their grades, which I don't know what she was studying. It's not notated here in our notes, but it's just it's so wrong.
Right.
It's just like gaslighting.
Right. Yeah. They're trying to cast blame
disgusting.
to somebody else, and they're going to do it and make, it's
Blame
very
and just
awful.
like destroy you,
Yeah. Yeah.
just ruin you
Yeah.
after
It's
you've
like
already been abused.
it's like, how dare you spurn my advances? How dare you say I did something wrong? How dare you tell other people about it? Now I'm going to destroy you, basically.
Or do that, or do this to my friend or my buddy or whoever it is.
Right.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
gross to me.
Yeah. Okay, then
I would hope
another
that these people would. Sorry, I would hope that these people would feel some ounce of shame and like own up to it, apologize, any of the above.
it's so rare. That's a rare thing.
I think it takes
To
strength.
find the
That's why.
person who owns up to their crap. Okay, so another letter to the editor was by Linda Holzer, who at the time was associate professor of music at the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. And she wrote in her quote, "Your article, Music's Open Secret, was timely. The topic of inappropriate sexual advances made by faculty members towards students is disturbing, but there will be no improvements if the topic is avoided. And then another quote from her article was, the results of sexual involvement between a student and a faculty member can be emotionally devastating for the student because of the unbalanced, manipulative nature of the relationship. This is an issue where zero tolerance should be the only policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you speaking directly in your mic, just FYI?
Am I still?
It's pretty soft. Is it fine on that end?
Well, my volume on
Fine.
the app we're using to record this, it
Fine.
shows it at the same level as yours.
Okay, cool.
I hope
That's
that's
fine.
right. Yeah, I
Sure.
mean, I can
Okay,
turn
if
it.
it's fine, if it's fine there, leave it alone. I just
I'll
wanted to check.
I'll slide the mic up a little closer to me. Watch, we we listen to it this, and I'm like, blah blah blah.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Okay, so the last letter that I was going to highlight was surprising to me because I know this person's daughter actually, and I had no idea I was going to see this. So this is a letter written by Martin M. Guterman from Belmont, Massachusetts, and I'm just going to read it. So he writes this: to the editor, I am the parent of a music student and have long been horrified by the reports I've heard from my daughter's friends of highly inappropriate sexual behavior by music faculty members. Each of the schools they attend seem to have one or two teachers who are widely known for improper behavior. Although it is rare to actually witness such behavior, I once saw a teacher stroking his student's thigh while discussing the performance that another student had just given in a recital.
Gross.
Unfortunately, the response of most music schools is to look the other way. The response of Robert Freeman, the dean of the University of Texas Fine Arts College, quote, nothing he's seen or heard about at Austin is different from what goes on in schools of music elsewhere, end quote, is inadequate. This behavior must be stopped everywhere. And
Yeah.
so it's really, like, it's profound. And so when it was so interesting, I was reading this, and Kara was kind of sitting across the room from me today while I was kind of going down this rabbit hole, and I found these letters to the editor, and I was reading through them. I actually started to cry because this was so meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is I know how much he meant to Beth, and it was touching to me that he was not in music. He was a mathematician. I talked to Beth about this today, and he took the time. Somehow he found this article, right? And then he took the time to write about it and to say, look, I believe my daughter. I believe my daughter's friends. I believe what's happening. And this needs to stop. This is
And he
not
saw it
okay.
with his own eyes.
Yeah, and he saw
Yeah.
it as well. Yeah. And so I just felt like it showed, this one little brief letter showed the type of person he was, the type of father he was, and
Yeah.
that, and that he would make this very public stance. And I was just very
I wish
touched
we
by
had
that.
more men like him around. I mean, I know they exist. But that's big for him to write that. Take the time to write it.
Yeah. And I think the other part that kind of
It's
got to
heartening.
me, like in an emotional way, was he's passed away. And I think he passed away like the year after he wrote this. And it was so touching to me because, the actions and the actions that we do and the words that we say will
Yeah.
live on after we are gone. And so
Yep.
these words, this choice that he made, it's still impacting people in a really positive and profound way. And I just thought, wow, that's so touching. And also the other thing was the time frame in which he's writing. I was at school with his daughter. And so
Yeah.
we were at Juilliard together. And so some of that, what he's probably seeing and what she's telling him and what her friends are telling him, I was probably in that same environment. I was
Yeah, it's
around these
it's
same
even
people.
more it's even more like touching because this man knew more about it than we did at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Um, that is pretty stunning.
Yeah, and I also, this show, most of our listeners for this podcast, from looking at the analytics, makes sense that it's mainly women. Like 70% of our audience is women. But it's wonderful to know that, roughly 30% is men. And I always, want to point out, and I don't do it very often, that having men who support women is like hugely needed, hugely
Yeah.
needed. Partly because, we talk a lot about systemic racism and sexism. So people who sit in those power positions, white men, will kind of inherently have usually those positions of power, right? Where they can use those positions and that
Yeah.
power to advance the cause of women and to protect women and to stand up for women. And
Yeah.
that's that's part of what pushes change forward.
I mean, I feel like he was well ahead of the time,
Definitely.
which is really amazing. I mean, that makes me feel cared about because when I was, what year are we talking about? 20,
This is
2002?
2002. Yeah.
I had no idea I would be a victim of sexual abuse. No idea.
Yeah.
It wouldn't come for another 8 years for me. And now I'm a big advocate. But I don't think, I mean, obviously I didn't know much about it. I knew this stuff went on, but it didn't impact my world yet.
Right.
So to hear that from a man, especially a man of his generation, is amazing. I
Right.
feel like
Yeah.
makes me feel lucky that people like him exist, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah. All right. So,
it's amazing.
yeah. And so the letters to the editor, I think highlight really positive things, but also highlight the negative side of what was happening after this article was published. So you saw people at the University of Texas defending Dan Welcher, and you see people from composition and other segments of U.S. academia defending Dan Welcher. So people are rushing to his defense, and
Yeah.
also like saying terrible things about the woman who is coming forward. Oh, she can't compose. She's terrible. She has no talent.
Which
She's
begs
just
the
bitter.
question, what are you supposed to do when something like this happens? Just shut up, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess so, because the people who don't want the people they know to be called out are just going to let you know it's not okay,
Yeah.
regardless of if it's true. I don't understand why that's so hard for people to see.
Yeah.
But okay, let's move on to the
Okay.
next.
All right. So the next article we're going to talk about, and this is the article where I read a paragraph from it already. This is called the title Music's Perpetually Open Secret. 18 years after they were first reported, allegations of sexual harassment at the Butler School of Music have continued. It was written by Sammy Sussman and published September 26th of 2019.
18 years later. Wow.
Yeah. Or 17. Well, I guess no, the allegations were from
Yeah,
2021 or
2001.
2001. One of them I read, though,
That's
was like
right.
December of 2000 as well. So it's somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay.
The article, though,
Okay.
came out 2002. You're right. Yeah.
But a long time
A
after.
long time. Long time. That would be like
18 years.
all of, yeah, it'd be
18
like,
years of unabated predation.
it would be from
Cool.
kindergarten to your senior year before anything happened. Yeah.
Which when we talk about cases like this, really any kind of crime or abuse, usually decades go by before anything's done about it. It's just like par for the course.
Right.
It's really sad.
Right. But again,
People
something
try.
will happen. Something will happen now, though. And it's
Yeah.
because of this article, because of Sammy
Right, but
Smith's article.
you know, yeah, and I know we can get into this in a minute, but like people are always talking about due process and let the criminal justice system work and let the systems of justice do their jobs. The problem is they don't. They're broken systems that don't work. So then people do have to go this route.
Yeah.
It's the only way,
Yeah.
seemingly, in our society.
Yeah.
Maybe that will become more apparent as more and more of these stories surface. I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Because it really puts victims at a disadvantage
Yeah.
where people just do not understand the climate that we live in.
Right. Right.
I mean, you and I have talked about this. What?
No, I'm just thinking about our current political climate as well.
Well, I mean, you and I have talked about this, but before I reported my assault, we had no idea that the criminal justice process was in the state that it was.
Right. I just
We just
assumed,
thought you go to the police, they take care of things.
yeah, bad people who do bad things get, prosecuted.
It's just, it's
Bad
so
people go to jail.
convoluted.
Right.
There's so much that plays into it that I never knew.
Right.
Anyway, so let's get going.
Okay. Do you want to talk about the Sammy's article highlights specifically one person's new allegations. Do you want to take it from there?
Sure. So one person's named Brandon Scott Rumsey. This person, they were at UT Austin from 2012 to 2014, and they spoke up with allegations in 2017. And the allegations were non-consensual kissing, repeated sexual comments, and asking for intimate details about their sex life. Okay. Do you want to do the next?
Sure. And then another former UT Austin student and member of the new music ensemble came forward to say that Dan Welcher grazed her leg with his hand as they discussed a musical score. And another instance where he gave her a hug and then grabbed her butt as she was leaving a concert. And in the same article, Sammy then talks about the allegations that came from the 2002 article. So he talks about Monica Lynn. He talks about the anonymous grad student and their allegations. Yeah. There's some things that were not in the first article. So he writes also that, and this is talk a little bit about the retaliation.
Can I just touch on one thing?
Yep.
So it is those two that are listed. Sammy also mentions in the same article that there was sort of this broad, this sort of broad acknowledgement of repeated sexually explicit comments about students, sexually explicit jokes directed towards students, both made in public and private settings, frequently in front of groups of people. Welcher would joke about male genitalia. There was an allegation about an instruction he gave before the ensemble that he conducts to keep it kinky. So there were other allegations. There was one, a female composition student from the mid-2010s described an incident in which he commented on her appearance after a concert, telling, I think also said this in front of her group, saying he thought it was hot. And then there was another mention of the article about him rating two female performers with how, pardon me, fuckable they were. I just kind of wanted to broadly get those all out there before we talked about any of the sort of the aftermath of those allegations.
Right. Yeah. So that was I kind of forgot about those. Sorry about that. Those
That's
are important.
Okay. They were down below.
Yeah. Those are the new allegations. They came out.
It's just sort of a method of behavior.
Yeah. Pattern of behavior. Right there.
So I wanted and it wasn't always someone coming forth with a specific allegation. They were like, oh yeah, we've heard those things. Oh yeah, we've seen those things.
Right. Exactly. And then, anyway. Monica Lynn, during this article, she also says that she went to a composer who was at UT at the time asking for a letter of recommendation, and she says that he had been instructed not to do so. So it's just an example of retaliatory behavior by other faculty member from UT Austin towards this person who originally came forward. That was those allegations were made in this new article by Sammy. Okay. And then, what happens after the article, basically, right? What happens after Sammy wrote this article? The university, for the first time, places Dan Welcher on leave. Right after the article.
Right after they get public scrutiny.
Yeah. So they finally do a real investigation.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, let's say they did do an investigation before.
Right.
As we discussed.
There were two investigations prior. One by the school itself. We know it sounds like a
it doesn't make sense. Their statements make no sense.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like a very good
We corroborated this, but there's no harassment.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense.
No. And then that was the Department of Education's. Yeah.
Okay, well.
Yeah. Okay,
so super safe.
There were a couple other articles that we looked at while we were preparing for this. And so Sammy ends up writing a second article. It was Sammy's second, called The Perpetual Investigation. After 19 years of sexual harassment allegations and 3 investigations, Dan Welcher has been fired. And this was published April 9th of 2020. And so in that article, he kind of summarizes what happened. And we're going to read a paragraph, 2 paragraphs from that. And the other article, and so after Sammy released this, the Daily Texan, another like Texas publication, they started to.
How could you tell?
I don't. It's from Missouri. No, yeah. They started also writing articles about this about Dan Welcher and UT Austin. And so I was going to read a quick quote from their story. It highlights Sammy's writing. And this is from an article called Butler School Professor Dan Welcher Resigned After Sexual Harassment Misconduct Violations. This was written by Chase Caracostas and published March 30th of 2020. And so this was actually published 10 days prior to Sammy's second article dropping. Okay. And so this paragraph says...
Paracle. I
think I was thinking paragraph and article. Paracle.
It's paracle. Cute.
That was awesome. Paracle. That's kind of a fun word. Okay.
It's cute. I like it.
Yeah. It's like Francisco from Elf.
Read the paracle.
Sorry. Okay, I got to read the paracle. Okay. It says, last September, an article by Van magazine detailed a number of allegations of sexual harassment and inappropriate sexual conduct of students against Welcher. UT received 11 written reports of similar allegations against Welcher regarding similar harassment directed at other current and former students after the article's publication, according to the documents which the Texan obtained via an open records request. So we wanted to highlight this paragraph because after Sammy's article comes out, 11 more allegations come out. Right?
Yeah, shocking.
Yeah.
I never understand. Let's just take a minute. I never understand why these institutions don't, when they have the opportunity, when things are already brought up, why they don't just extend out for more people, like put a call out? Do you have any information?
Right.
Because how often is there a place for these people to feel safe enough to come forward?
Right.
I mean, we see what happens when one person comes forward or 2 people come forward. They're maligned and broken down and shunned.
Right.
I just don't understand why it has to take 3 investigations to get anyone to come forward.
Right. Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say, so Sammy's articles, I don't think I mentioned this, were published in Van magazine. And Van magazine is a magazine that specializes in articles related to classical music and the classical music industry. So just wanted to put that out there. I don't think I said that. Okay. Then I wanted to quickly read. Okay, so let's see. Sammy. Oh, we also wanted to say this. So in Sammy's second article, he mentions in there that he was also contacted by other people just out in the music composition world who were just saying randomly, oh yeah, I remember Dan Welcher. He did this to me and he said this to me and I saw this inappropriate behavior. So it was a kind of a widespread, again, like the word open secret has been used multiple times in these articles. An open secret in the music composition world. And all these people are like, oh yeah, I know. That's how I saw that. Okay.
Now
that Sammy has brought this forth. Okay. So the last 2 paragraphs I'm going to read are from Sammy's second article, and I'm reading it because I felt like it really... Cara, do you want to read this, or do you want me to read it?
I can read it. Is it the every person deserves the right?
Yes. So this is Sammy's second article, the very last 2 paragraphs of his article.
Okay. Every person deserves the right to respond to the allegations against them. Every person has the right to due process. But in the case of Welcher, this process at the university level has concluded, and it is found that Welcher committed sexual harassment according to the university's own code. It found him guilty of 1, referring to students in inappropriately affectionate terms, 2, making sexually suggestive jokes and other references, 3, inquiring into the sexual and romantic activities of students, 4, exposing students to nude imagery while at his home, 5, giving shoulder massages, 6, touching and kissing others about their face, and 7, touching or attempting to touch students on the buttocks.
There you go.
Do you want me to read the rest?
Oh, yeah, sorry. There was another paragraph. My bad.
Welcher's alleged harassment had first been reported to the university in 2001. It had been reported to the Department of Education and the public in 2002. It had been reported to 2 university faculty in 2018. It had circulated in whisper networks for years, but it took Van's reporting for the investigation to corroborate this alleged harassment. Perhaps rather than implementing mandatory sexual harassment and misconduct training videos, we should question the underlying systems that have allowed this sexual harassment to take place. 19 years is too long. 3 investigations are too many. Nothing more needs to be said. That is spot on.
Yeah, 100%. Mic drop. Sammy says that.
Yeah. For the win. He's amazing.
Yeah, it's really profound.
And he just puts it out there. He's not even like, it's just reality. It's just like facts.
Right.
It's fact-based.
Yep.
You cannot argue with that.
Yeah. So good. So, I don't know. So, from the titles, we know that Dan Welcher, so he was going to be terminated by the University of Texas because it concluded he was guilty, basically. He was guilty of breaking
they
their
were
code
going
of
to
conduct.
fire him, and
Yeah.
he stepped in and resigned.
And yeah, so he resigned. So he's no longer there. So that's the end of his time there. And
But he claimed that it had nothing to do with guilt.
right, yes, and
Nothing to do with the allegations.
He
It was
denied
just-
everything, and
Because he basically said, yeah, he denied it. It wasn't true. He just knew he was never going to get fair and due process.
right, complained about that. Yeah, it's
So
just
he resigned.
shocking. Yeah, and so the other thing I wanted to point out, think back to 2001, when Monica Lynn comes forward and says this happened, and then she was just treated terribly. No one believed her, in positions of power within music, and she was just shoved aside. And Dan was left there to just do the same stuff, continue doing the inappropriate stuff.
It's also like, he didn't say anything of note in his defense. He just said, I didn't do it, and she's a liar,
Right.
and she's not good at music.
Right.
That was his defense.
Yeah.
If he's really innocent, why is he not actually giving himself a defense?
I don't know.
He didn't even try. He just said, no, it didn't happen.
Well, I think that's just, it highlights our system. It highlights the patriarchy. It highlights sexism. Because that's all he has to do for people to be like, oh, yeah, he's telling the truth. Yeah, I believe him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, we see that in our current political landscape. We have all of these countless people who are going to be gaining high amounts of power in top positions within the government, who have a lot of sexual assault allegations against them. A lot of these guys do. And they're like, I didn't do it. Oh, everybody believes it. See, that's, yeah. So that's, I think, the reason that men go that route is because that's all they have to do. Oh, I didn't do it. And then they come up with a whole list of reasons why you can't trust women. Hashtag sexism.
It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is kind of related to that, the systems that are in place that we talk about, racism, sexism. And this is something I've just kind of come across through my Instagram browsing. Do you think this is a good time to show that video?
Sure.
Okay, so I want to set it up basically. So Cara brought up a point where men who are accused of things can just say really, I didn't do this or whatever. We've seen this repeatedly in our political world today. And that's that, millions of people will believe the man, and who cares about the woman? Whatever. She's trash. She's a tramp. She's a slut. She's a blah, blah, blah. She's a liar. She's a whatever. But that's the system. That is the culture. And people, all of us have been
She's only
programmed.
that after she makes a complaint.
Right.
If you just stay silent and you don't make waves, you're fine.
Right. And so that kind of plays into this kind of something I discovered on Instagram. And it's something I think it's so fascinating and so true. And part of it for me kind of stems from the frustration I have felt towards other women's responses a lot of times to sexual violence, to sexual
Which
assault
are
allegations.
maybe even more painful.
Yeah, because you assume that women will get it, will understand that they live in the same world. They know the culture, they see the sexism, they I'm sure a lot of women are treated this way. I forget that it was 1 in 6 women have been raped or have experienced an attempted rape. So there's a high number of real bodily understanding of this type of treatment and violence. And yet, we look at who voted for a particular person going to the White House. 50% of white women voted for that person, despite the fact that over 20 women have come forward with credible allegations of sexual misconduct. Yet, they're like, oh, well, you know. Okay, so part of the reason I want to highlight this video, so there's a woman named Koa Beck.
I
And
think it's I think it's less oh well and more like he didn't do it.
right, it's just like, oh, that can't possibly be true. And they blame women. That's yeah. So I feel like I might not summarize this point well, but this woman's name is Koa Beck, and she's written a book called White Feminism. And I'm just going to play her video because I think she's going to be way better at talking about this, obviously, than me. So, okay. So let me share my screen. Share screen. All right, Carrie, you can let me know. Are you seeing it?
Yes, now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So here we go.
White feminism exports and advocates a very specific skill set to navigate patriarchy rather than dismantle it. So to give you an example, and I have many that are cited, white feminism has always been very big on sort of presenting patriarchy as this like almost video game. And if you can get enough education, if you can get enough skill sets, if you can get enough like hacks or cheating codes or outfits or different sort of people helping you out, you can succeed in patriarchy. But those exact barriers that you're jumping over, that you're trying to hack, that you're getting around, those don't change. And white feminism as an ideology and a practice has never been about changing those barriers. Contrastly, like I said, the other points, Black feminism, Chicana feminism, many working class feminisms, at politics, absolutely, focus on those barriers and taking down those barriers rather than optimizing yourself.
Click the link in the bio to get the book.
And so the Instagram site I was following is called Whiteness Studies. So that's what, but her name is Koa Beck, and I really would like to read her book. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen. Okay, there we go.
You want to keep going here?
Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight that partly because what we're about ready to discuss. So from the very first article we discussed today, Music's Open Secret by Robin Wilson from the Chronicle of Higher Education, there are 2 women who come forward to make quotes in her article, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, and they're both white women who come forward, and they make light of these allegations. And I find that really interesting. Okay. So, quote number 1, this is from Robin Wilson. And so within this quote, she quotes these women. Robin writes, "Some female students consider such personal contact and crude behavior part of the territory." And then I say woman X. I'm not going to use their names,
Yeah.
but you can read the article. So woman X, who runs an electronic mailing list on gender and music technology and is writing a book about the history of women composers, says, quote, "Putting up with crap is just part of the road to success. There are women who say that's a crime and wonder why they should have to do that. But my personal opinion is because you do." So that woman X is a white woman. All right. Another quote from the same article. "Female musicians who have been successful here say that while male professors can be crude and rude, they don't believe that amounts to sexual harassment." Quote, "Dan Welcher shoots his mouth off," says woman Y. who is finishing up her doctorate in vocal performance at the music school. He could use a few lessons. Robin goes on to say, but nothing Professor Welcher has done qualifies as sexual harassment in her book. And then woman Y says, there are women who really experience sexual harassment, and that's what bugs me the most, says woman Y. If these women at UT were expecting to go through life without these kind of men in the world, they need to get a grip. They're everywhere. And then Robin goes on to write, in fact, legal experts say that while unwanted touching and aggressive sexual behavior are considered sexual harassment under the law, so are comments and suggestions that are unwelcome and that create an atmosphere of hostility. And so the author is making it clear that what these women are saying is they're excusing sexual harassment. They're saying, oh, this isn't a big deal, guys, or they don't believe it, or they're like, whatever.
It sounds like they believe it. They just think it's just the way it is.
Right. And that to me reminds me of what we just saw in the Instagram video by Koa Beck, the white feminism.
We see it everywhere.
Yeah. It's like, well, you can't change it, so you just got to deal with it. But it's not like, the barriers that exist, it's just going to be so much more difficult for women of color and for, LGBTQ people because the barrier's there. The barrier's like really there.
I also just think it's like it starts here. And unchecked, unabated, it just goes toward the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, from
That sort of behavior.
From harassment to rape.
Worse. Yeah.
Right.
I really think it does.
Yeah. But the problem is, I think,
it's allowed.
This stereotype of woman, this stereotype of white woman who says, whatever, it's not a big deal. Even if women come forward with allegations of rape, I have a feeling these women would also be like, we don't believe her.
Well, yeah, we've seen it happen over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just, it's something that white women really need to sit with and understand. Why is it?
You think it's just white women? Or
I'm sure that all women are impacted by the cultural patriarchy, cultural sexism. We're all impacted by it. And none of us are immune.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
But there is,
right. No, we're not.
I think though that, there's something to be said though for white women. Like, what are we doing?
By and large, yeah.
Yeah. Why did half of us vote for Donald Trump? Who has been liably found guilty, who has been found liable, let me get it right, found liable for sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And credibly accused by over 20 women.
Yep.
Why is it that 50% of white women still voted for him?
Preaching to the choir.
Yeah. Black women got it. They're like, no, thank you. Right?
Good for them. I'm on board with them.
Yes, me too. Okay. All right. Let's see. I just want to okay. So I wanted to highlight, the old advice has been in the past, just deal with it, right? Just deal with it. And don't come to the aid of a woman who might have been harassed because you won't succeed then, right? So those are kind of the two things that you were told. Like, maybe not literally told, but you knew them. You knew this is the way of the culture. Yeah, this is how you should behave. And so I wrote down, like, I feel like the reason those exist is for a complexity of reasons, right? A layering of reasons. And I wrote down, believing the system cannot be fixed, feeling powerless to change the system, not believing there even is a system, not believing in any of that. There is no racism, there's no sexism, there's no patriarchy. I don't believe in that. There's that. There's internalized sexism, internalized believing that women aren't as good, and that's you. Like, you internalizing this. Wow. Men are the only people you can trust, not women. So this is the internalized sexism. Believing the culture lies about women. Believing the cultural lies. Sorry, about women.
The culture does lie about women. The culture
lies about women, yes.
Yeah.
Racism.
So believing the cultural lies about women.
Okay. Right. And then we have racism. And then believing you can game the system and get ahead.
See, that one resonates with a lot of people, I think. You figure out how to best make yourself succeed. It's very selfish.
Right.
Like, you just do what you got to do to get ahead, no matter what.
Yep.
And you'll walk on people's backs if you need to. I mean, that's just horribly selfish.
Yeah.
We see that all the time in our industry.
Yeah. Sadly.
I've seen that. I've heard, there have been people who've felt badly about my story in hindsight. But they totally did that early on.
Yeah.
Just like walked all over me. And people like me.
Right.
Just to make sure they were going to be okay.
Right.
I can't imagine doing that to another human being, but
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. So
Nevertheless,
nevertheless,
our generation and the generation behind us are demanding the systems change.
right.
The system change.
Right.
And I'm so glad.
Me too.
The generations younger than us are vastly different. And it's really heartening.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like they show up and they see sexism and they're like,
Not cool.
"This is not okay.
Yep.
I will not deal. Like, this has got to go." Yeah.
It's absolutely the way it always should have been.
Right.
It's very heartening, though. Makes you imagine what society could look like down the road.
For sure. For sure.
Like, also, like, imagine, like, where you and I would be had we not gone through some stuff in our life. I think we would still be good people, but we've definitely, like, become better, more empathetic people because of the things we've been forced to deal with.
Right. For sure.
But I'm sort of like, on one hand, it sucks to have the veil lifted, to see, like, the darkness everywhere.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'm grateful that I know it exists, so I can be a better person. I like see that these things really do impact people. They really do harm people, and they need advocates and they need supporters.
Right.
I would much rather know all of it and proceed that way than to never have become aware.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
down in the trenches with the marginalized.
Yeah. Normally we would celebrate women at this point, I think, but we're just going to call it a day.
Culture tells us not to.
Right. We're believing the cultural lies about women.
Wow.
Oh, no.
Just
No.
for episode 11.
No. Well, I think we should celebrate all the women who chose to come forward with their allegations. And
Yeah, I like it.
and Brandon as well.
Yep.
Yeah, with their allegations.
And I'm
And
sure there were other.
And Robin Wilson and Sammy
Yep.
for their great journalism as well.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yep. And to Martin Guterman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you next time.